Hey, we're live. Geez, that happened real quick this time. Last time didn't happen so quick. As a matter of fact, it's saying I got some issues on X. I have a lot of issues on X, so that's not really a big deal. Anyway, Brent Leary here. First few good weeks, first few good minutes of the week. And if I can learn how to talk, it'll be actually really good minutes because it's going to be a really interesting show here, I believe, because it's always good talking to some people call him the Midas of Martech. I think I called him the Golden Smog of CRM or something like that. And he's also the voice of PPN, our own Anand Thaker. But besides all that stuff, he does other things like advisory and investing, and still I think he dabbled a little in the Martech. But we're going to bring him on specifically for something that I know he's interested in. I'm very interested in when I heard about it. And I think we'll have a great conversation around that subject. But before I bring him on, I have a little news. If I can bring this up. I hate when I can't bring this up because tomorrow, I told you we were going to be having more frequent conversations with the one and only Ron Miller over at TechCrunch. And we are doing just that. So tomorrow, Ron is going to join me for what I call a few more good minutes with Ron Miller, because we're going to make this regular. Hopefully we'll make it at least a monthly kind of thing. And, just go to Ron's column over in TechCrunch. Just Google him and you'll see all his latest writings. So what we're going to do is we're just going to touch on a few of the latest things that are getting his attention, whether it's companies or technologies or, well, all right, Gen AI. Can't kind of get away from that right now. But whatever he's talking about, we're going to dig into it. Read the columns, come for the conversation afterwards, or you can do it in reverse order if you want. But tomorrow, so join us tomorrow for that. Let me get back on track here. All right. So yesterday, it was last week. I think it was last week. Article came out, and it was talked about Andreessen Horowitz, which is very well-known VC firm. And doing a lot of things, have a lot of money, have a lot of companies they're invested in. Article came out, I think it was credited towards the information about how they are stockpiling GPUs, AI chips, stockpiling it and kind of using it as a way to, I guess, attempt, gain the favor of like the high flying startups that show probably the most interest or maybe the best chance of success in the AI market. And so I was like, damn, that's they're talking about up to 20,000 GPUs they're stockpiling so that they can let their companies use. And I was like, man, that sounds really interesting. So I immediately turned to a friend and one and only Anand Thaker, because he actually has done this too. Well, maybe not at the level as they have, but we'll get into that. So before we bring him on, we start talking about this. I did pull a couple of clips to kind of set the stage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play those clips, and then we'll come back and we'll have Anand on to talk about not just what they said, but what he thinks, what the implication may be for all this. So here we are. Check this out.
They're the new currency in the age of AI. So Andreessen Horowitz is amassing tens of thousands of them to gain an edge in deal making. This according to the information. The idea here is that Andreessen can offer access to Nvidia chips in exchange for equity in the most promising Gen AI startups. That is because GPU access can be harder to secure than cash. And to build an AI business, founders need compute power, access to the most advanced infrastructure, most critically in that building. For VC funds like Andreessen, though, there's more risk involved. They're spending hundreds of millions of dollars, likely of LP money, to rent or buy GPUs and then offering it to startups at the very early stages, many of them with still unproven business models.
It's a great idea that they stole. This idea was pioneered by Daniel Gross, who founded a really, really interesting company called Pioneer Labs. And what they did at Pioneer Labs is they kind of gamified startups, or really more like product launches and like you could kind of score points, move up a leaderboard for releasing products and having product velocity, which has always been product velocity, the key to startup success. How quickly can you iterate on your product? But what they did was they created something called the Andromeda. Nat Friedman and he got a bunch of GPUs together, clusters of Nvidia H100s, and they did this back in the day. They launched it in June of 2023. So why is this important? Well, the same reason why getting credits from Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, Oracle, and other folks has been so powerful. If you give startups, 100,000 in credits, 50,000 in credits, it really does help because they would have to spend that. So you're kind of letting them experiment. If they do succeed, they're going to be very thankful to you, and maybe they'll buy more clusters from you. So this is just a little piece of candy.
Just a little piece of candy. It sounds like a lot of pieces of candy here, but let's see if it's a lot of pieces of candy, because here he is, the one and only Anand Thaker. Now, I said that you were the Midas of Martech, but you know what? Now that you're into this GPU acquisition thing, I'm calling you the Galahad of GPUs. How about that?
I think it's always an exercise to come up with a new name for all the crazy eclectic stuff, the rabbit holes I go down, right? So it's great to see you. It's been a while, Brent. I'm glad to be back on, and this is a fun topic to talk about, and certainly something I'd love to revisit with everybody.
Absolutely. Well, you were in Atlanta, but since then you've moved away from us, man. So with good reason. With good reason. So I'm not gonna make it negative about that. But anyway, so you got a little taste of what was said there, the little opening with CNBC and Jason Calacanis. So I mean, when I first saw the news, I was like, wow, 20,000. They're trying to build a stockpile of 20,000 GPUs. I was like, wow, that sounds like something brand new. And then listening to Jason, it's like, well, not exactly brand new, but could be very effective. I mean, what's your take on all this?
Well, even this concept of venture capital is always the idea of venture capital in terms of as a firm, right? They are building collective mass to help startups grow quickly within a particular environment, right? So, it's the same as having money you're giving out. It could be same as space that you have hosted. I mean, these concepts aren't new in terms of how VCs or companies who are investing in other companies or founders are trying to accelerate their ability to grow their company by blocking and tackling. And this is another one of those blocking and tackling. So he might talk about Pioneer being certainly another credited person, and they definitely were. Gross was amazingly innovative about doing that initially, but that isn't even a new concept. I like to think about, for people who are thinking about all these CPUs and GPUs and supercomputers, that it's a lot like Office space, right? Starting off, you're helping a company by incubating them. You might even have them in your own office space. Then they kind of grow up a little bit, but they don't need a full amount of office space. They don't need to buy their own, say, GPU or server room. So they move into co-working, which is sort of a shared, space where they can share facilities and share the benefits and costs. And then you move into dedicated office space. So the analogy would be, you're probably working with a VC to help you start the company. You get off the ground. The venture capitalists will be able to figure out whether you're onto something or not. And then if you are, then you can start arranging your own contracts with different firms, or maybe even directly with other service providers. And then the dedicated office space analogy would be, you're starting to go get your own servers, maybe hosting them internally as well. So even that concept of what VCs are supposed to do for startups besides just the capital is this sort of operational support that they're talking about, whether it's advisors, whether it's infrastructure, or whether it's extra financial capital and partners at their disposal.
Is this relatively new from the standpoint of, like, I would assume the same kind of thing was going on at the beginning of like AWS and Azure with all the different, renting of disk space and compute, but it was being done by the actual technology vendors. Is it new that now we got the VCs coming in and saying, hey, look, we could kind of do the same thing. We'll just buy it ourselves and then we'll make it available to these folks?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like an appearance of charity, but it's not, right? I mean, either there, like as the announcer had mentioned, there is a trade of equity, which is fair. I mean, you're trying to start something new in the AI space, and you need to leverage these particular LLM models, or if you're going to the deep learning path or other AI components. I mean, LLMs are just a small fraction of, or not small fraction, but a small number of use cases for AI in a lot of different fronts. So even that is not, yeah, it's definitely not a new concept from that standpoint. It's just, I like to say, what's old is new again. And so this particular execution and this strategy is old, but certainly using chips is relatively new. As we are seeing and will continue to see as a result of it. So the big risk for Andreessen, right, is all right, you got this latest shovel, but what happens when that shovel is old again, right? Antiquated. If some other venture capital, firm decides to buy the H200s, which is the, newest versions, as opposed to these H100s, which is the current version, what is there a competitive advantage for that? I think that's all the toss up in terms of how that works out. But they are trying to build stronger relationships, but it's also they will charge the startups or they will ask for equity. And that's what, Andreessen's doing here, is trying to build the infrastructure to build better startups or acquire the right founders or the best founders as a result of it. If I might add, there's another company we should talk, another firm called Index Ventures, and they did this last year as well. And they worked with Oracle to do it. So they didn't buy a single chip at all. And what they did was they worked with Oracle and said, hey, we know you're acquiring a bunch of this. We have a great relationship. Why don't you, extend that relationship to our startups that we're working with? And then, we'll come up with an arrangement, which is obviously the secret sauce in this whole thing in terms of how much Oracle gets, preference, the relationships have preference, right? There's just another dimension of how to create a matrix of support for these startups and hoping that you're tackling these growth trajectories sooner than later.
Before I get to Alan's question, are chips? Is it such a place in time because of maybe the lack of supply and it seems like kind of extreme demand for these chips? Is this just the time and space that this chip thing is able to kind of reimagine the way that a lot of stuff works? Not only now you see VCs spending billions of dollars on hardware, as a part of enticing potential startups. Before, that was the realm of felt like it was just the realm of either the software vendors or the hardware vendors. But to see the VCs come in and kind of figure out ways that they can play in this game too, I think that plays a way in changing the game forever for everybody if this kind of works, because there are other industries that'll be like, hey, we got millions of dollars, billions of dollars that we can throw at stuff. Maybe we should throw some over here and try to look. It's almost sort of like I feel like there's a lot of reimagining going on because of the importance of what AI seems to be, which was kind of unleashed on us by what OpenAI did back in November 2022. It feels like we're in the age of reimagination, and chips are kind of driving it, and they become an even more important currency because of all that.
To a degree. I mean, I think there's the AI piece of it that's certainly accelerated, but I've had the benefit. I'm in that sandwich generation. So I worked, I was lucky enough to work with, or fortunate enough to work with some of the older supercomputers back in the energy space and even the security arena. And it was the universities, companies, right? IBM, Oracle, even early days of Microsoft, they would say, listen, we've got the best computing power. We have the best machines. We have the best desks. We have the best ping pong table. I mean, whatever this, the array of things that would attract talent, which is the key to all of this, is manifested here. And so what will end up happening is AI chips are just another sort of iteration of that as a result of what kind of talent you're trying to attract and what kind of startups you're trying to build. I mean, Andreessen, again, they raised $7 billion in their latest fund. And by the way, that's to just give you a sense, Andreessen has $42 billion under management across all their funds. So $7 billion is a fraction of that, and then only $1.5 billion, and I say only $1.5 billion is, kind of earmarked for AI startups. So 20,000 ish, and pricing I'm sure fluctuates. That's about $500 million or maybe even less of money spent on buying hardware that will be obsolete in a couple of years, right? Or it won't be obsolete, but it may not have the same allure as it once used to have. But I think to your point, Brent, what has leaped forward is not just you can't go to the cloud and get you can go to the cloud, but it's incredibly expensive to use cloud-based usage of AI systems that are today that can be done at a fraction of the cost. Just like you mentioned, AWS and other cloud credits, right? Those things were incredibly expensive, and they eat up or rent even, right? They eat up so much investment capital that if you can alleviate that, and you can find a nice, accounting wise of financial means of being able to address that and apply that across across time or across portfolio companies, you have that the benefit of some collective critical mass that you can that will gravitate over time. So I don't think Andreessen's the business of making the most out of the investors' money and taking these big risks. They did it with crypto, they did it with other things in the past. Some worked out really well, some did not, right? So I think that they're onto something, and certainly they're not the first one to do it, and it can be it will be a deciding factor in who will succeed and who won't until we have more chips out in the ether.
So this is an incentive for those that I guess Andreessen Horowitz sees as probably that has the better chances of winning. When you look at all the different companies out there that are all looking for money, that are all playing in AI, Gen AI, EIO, whatever it is, it feels like this could be a potential way to attract the cream of the crop.
Absolutely. I mean, this has always been, and this is kind of where we were getting to, is that the previous ages of high growth has always had this idea of, let me go hire the right talent, right? Let me go hire the right leadership. There was a time when Apple would just go buy companies just because they wanted some leaders, right? So this is just another means of being able to go acquire that talent and acquire them quickly. So let's take another number perspective of it. Like one of these H100 chips is it costs $30,000 retail, ISK, if you can get one. Right now, if you could take one chip and eventually recruit somebody, it takes maybe $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 to recruit somebody. But if you could say, hey, look, I've got an array of AI chips at my disposal, ready to go, come work for me or come to our startup. I mean, you just saved yourself a bunch of money in terms of headhunting costs or recruiting costs. And I think that's the race that we're talking about, is this particular talent recruitment as a result of it.
So if you're a startup and you're, looking to make the best move forward to try to get what you're doing in front of the right audience to succeed, the end result is to succeed, become a successful business. You have like one VC offering you, I'm just throwing out arbitrary numbers, $100 million, and another VC throwing out 50 million, but access to whatever number of GPUs that you need as part of the deal. What's the best one for the VC to take? I mean, for the startup to take?
I mean, you have to run the numbers, but it's an attractive feature to get something that no one else has, right? I think it's, if you're going to be using 100 shovels versus an excavator, that's going to be a big difference in terms of who you're going to go with, right? And you're willing to give up more equity. You're willing to say, let's say if you're a worker at a startup, you're willing to give up more equity because you believe that they will succeed a little bit more. So it is a cost factor into this. And sometimes it doesn't matter about the numbers so much as it does about the speed and the execution and the quality of people you're bringing into the fold.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that part. Yeah. So you are going with a company who has let's just take money out of it. A company, a VC that has GPU access and willing to share it with you, and a VC that says we don't have that. All things. That's kind of not equal, but I was gonna say all things equal. So what does that allow the startup to do faster by having these GPUs at their disposal? And I don't even know what it would take for them to actually begin using it. But how quickly, how does this impact these startups in the way that they can actually reach a more mass audience?
Yeah, and this is a fantastic question because you can't, it's not necessarily you can't access, it's not that people can't access AI cycles for CPUs today. You can go and rent them today, but the cost is so prohibitive that it becomes a real problem. So it may not be such a big deal for early stage startups where you're trying to prove your customer, prove your product market fit. You could probably do that at a level of cost to some degree, but when you grow and you get into that A stage, B stage, C stage, these costs are going to eat you alive. And when you're going to ask for, more money or, more, partnerships or relationships, it becomes a real problem. Or even asking, some people to come on board, but you can't pay them because you got to pay your AI, AI cloud bill. That's going to be a real challenge. And versus like the cloud, you could start your own server, but then, availability of chips is a problem. So it's a real big issue later on. However, this is a great way to recruit early stage founders or early companies to go ahead and hop on to this conveyor belt that you've set aside for them. And then, now you don't, that's one thing that you are alleviated from worrying about. And I think that's what's on founders' minds is I don't want to have to deal with this. Like, I don't want to have to deal with rent. Okay, go co-working space. I don't want to have to deal with recruiting people. We'll go hire someone to help you do this. I don't want to deal with partnerships. Go find a partner that can go get you a bunch. I don't want to have to deal with, these infrastructure issues. Here's a good way of doing it. Even Nvidia was smart enough to realize that go-to-market execution or, fast execution was important. And there's a model of a server called the DGX. And it's literally out of the box. I mean, if you got enough money, it's out of the box. You get a server ready to go, right? And you could even plug, and it's scalable on its own. So you could plug other servers as you grow. So, it's not necessarily whether you can or can't because you're going with one firm or not, but it's the level of burn that is, incredibly important. And if your burn is, incredibly high and you're just not growing fast enough, that's going to be a real headache for you. And that's what Andreessen and the Index Ventures and and even Nvidia themselves are trying to alleviate.
So you mentioned a ton of positives for startups for doing this. So let's go to Alan's question now. What's the downside for the founders?
Yeah, the downside is you're going to be giving up more equity, right? I think it's you have pricing. I mean, this is nothing new, right? You're either going to give up more equity because you really want to work on an AI startup or building an AI startup, and you also are going to get somewhat locked in to, depending on the arrangement, in terms of the terms with that particular VC. So I've seen two terms where there is somewhat of a lock-in, but you can get out, but it's very expensive to do so, right? Because now you've got, let's say it costs you $3 an hour or $30 an hour to run, your models and your execution of your, AI platform on a particular server, right? But now if you go with a VC, they can do it for you from free all the way to maybe $10, $20. That's, $30, $20 sounds not like a lot, but with many hours, with many customers that you're going to be bringing on, that is a very preventative, part of the scale that you're working on. So, so you could always break free. It's kind of like selling your house. You have a house and you're sitting in it, but you could always sell it if you need to go somewhere else, but it's going to cost you, right? It's going to cost you to leave. It's going to cost you to go somewhere else. Who are you going to go with? And again, that's the hassles that a lot of AI-based startups are not necessarily really wanting to go into and deal with at this point. The other issue that has come up, or I've seen come up, but I'm not sure if it's really an issue or not, is whether the founders themselves decide that, let's say the product isn't growing as fast or is going as well, does a VC firm just cut you off? And that just completely, takes you out, cuts you off at your knees and you're unable to move forward. So, is that a part of that could potentially happen depending on depending on who you go with? So now you got to secretly go to another maybe venture firm. They'll buy you out, get you set up on their, server and then go to town. But again, these are early stage. The later stage ones, they might actually start to, it's going from that co-working space to a dedicated space. Now you're not relying on someone else's, platform or something that you're sitting on. You've got your own ecosystem and infrastructure in place, and maybe you have more free degrees of movement as a result of it. We'll see what other things come out of this. I think there's always a lot of devil in the details with the terms and how people are arranged, but right now this is a way for VCs to attract the best, and then certainly figure out what products and what types of problems to be solved are the right ones to solve with their investment into this in the first place.
It's all I'm starting to think about particular details as you were talking. I was like, do they say we give you this amount of money and this amount of access to our GPUs, and the like the tech startup was like, well, we want to make sure that we will always have a particular minimum access to the GPUs, that you cannot cut us off completely if we go with this. I mean, it sounds like it's a more complex form of cash to a certain extent, because
it is
cash, you can spend it. We love spending cash, but when it comes to GPUs, it's like you can use it, you can get maybe there's a certain, like we're at Prime Day here, this is the max capacity for Amazon, so there's like a max capacity. Maybe we need a max capacity clause and a minimum capacity clause and an out clause. If you go underneath the threshold for this GPU, then we're out. It sounds like there's so many things that are going to be tied into these arrangements going forward.
Yeah. I mean, Andreessen has a lot of capital, and there's a lot of other companies who have a lot of capital, and they're using this as a differentiator on top of everything else. And when you get into these larger VC firms, and sadly, I see this on the long tail of small VC funds or firms that do this, is that they're both in the business of investing in startups, but also in the business of startups, right? And part of renting this back, to founders is a business of the startup. Renting cloud is, there's a thing called a chargeback. I don't think it's going to get talked about a lot, but what happens is a VC will provide a particular service at a reduced cost because they can find some critical mass, some benefits as a result of buying more or having someone at your disposal, and they will charge the company back, the startup they invested in, back from those services as a way of sort of mitigating the cost and sharing the liability or the potential assets across the board. So, like I said, I mean, that's something to think about. Is there is certainly the investment of into startups, but then there's also the business of startups. But I think also it'd be interesting to know that relationship with Oracle that Index had provided. Now, if you had to leave Index and you said, "Hey, Oracle, basically, Index doesn't really have any actual servers, or they don't have any CPUs or GPUs. Can I come work with you? Or can I go work with another big cloud company that already has them and they need extra cycles?" That could be a changing dynamic that might happen. Is now VCs are competing with large firms who are incubating their own startups in some degree, which Nvidia has done with, like, I think CoreWeave and Inflection, right? So they use Nvidia GPUs as collateral as part of the fundraise. So they value the fundraise of how much the GPUs cost as a result of it.
Is this what you're talking about?
Well, here, what we're looking at here is this is part of the, I think one of the shareholder updates for NVIDIA, or one of the meetings that happened. So NVIDIA is starting to talk about how much the NVIDIA GPUs are data-oriented data centers are taking over more market share from your traditional, CPU arena. And this is kind of forward-looking for them. Is again, NVIDIA is the one selling shovels in a gold rush, right? So they are serving as the infrastructure for so many things, and that's why they're popular, and that's why a lot of investors are looking at them or have been paying premiums for them, is because they aren't just thinking about selling chips, they're selling potential the abilities to replace current data centers for a variety of reasons, and selling services to those particular boxes, and being able to generate revenue from that standpoint alone. So I mentioned that DGX, server box. Well, it's not you buy the box and go away. There are, some software updates and components that help address efficiency, help address, particular software integrations. There's a lot of things that you obviously need to be a part of. So they aren't thinking about just hardware and then they go away. They are very integrated with the customers that they're building, and this is part of that story. Is how can we become more of that infrastructure for everybody as a result of it, to solidify what they've been doing.
A couple of comments here from Hune. Yes, GPU sounds like new Bitcoin with very different valuations of the future value. And then maybe there will be a GPU coin as well, where AI capacity is a basis for crypto. Jesus, Hune, I mean, that's quite the sentence there you put together.
Sounds like somebody's building a startup of their own, right? Like to monetize on those CPU cycles. Well, I think one of the things is that these CPU cycles, the infrastructure and the architectures. Just to give again back to Nvidia, they used to go on a 2-year cycle. They would build a whole new architecture for the increase in semiconductor trends and innovation. Now they're going to every year. So imagine for a moment that not only are you trying to, let's say you're trying to build a city, not only are you saying, oh, well, we're going to create a new city from scratch, but now we're going to find new ways to build on that city on top of the infrastructure that, is required to make that the most cleanest, healthiest, most innovative or most, awesome place to be. So they are literally moving the cheese, big, huge blocks of cheese every single time. So if I think it's called the Denner effect, but it's Denner scaling. So the new chips can use the same amount of energy and increase the number of transistors. And you'll hear about transistors, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole for us unless somebody really wants me to. But while it's slowed, it's still constantly growing, which means that we're going to see more efficient, more energy efficient, more powerful CPUs are going to be, or GPUs are going to be coming out with servers that support them as a result of it. So,
all right. So let's. This has been great, but we've been talking about the big guys and what might be the potential for all this stuff. But let's get personal with the Galahad of GPUs here. I don't know where I came up with that. Anyway, because you're not only an investor and an advisor, and you've built AI businesses, you sold AI businesses, so you've played in all these different areas. But the other thing that you did was you yourself bought some GPUs. So from your perspective, from what you've done, from what you're doing, what you plan on doing in the future, tell us, why did you go ahead and buy your own GPUs, and kind of what went into that, and what kind of do you want to happen based on what you do with these GPUs?
Yeah, I get a lot of ideas. There's a lot of VCs who keep knocking on my door about, hey, you got a couple, can we throw it into our bucket? Well, for those of you that don't know, I'm actually a computer engineer. So while I've gotten into the software and the marketing, go-to-market side of things, the business and the executive, advisory efforts, I've been a computer engineer, so I've always been an engineer at heart, and I am fascinated by the infrastructure of all these, the progression of hardware. And AI, this is my third wave of AI. And at some point, I had to think about what's the best way to, sort of get into this and be able to play with it. Like, I like playing, like, I'm not the guy who keeps stuff in a box. Like, I'm not, especially when it's toys like this, right? And so so I bought two. They happened to be available. So I was like, I'll buy two. And I had a partnership and a relationship with a firm, and, they kind of thanked me by letting me buy at cost, what their, those GPUs were. So one I had actually intended on, and believe it or not, I use Nvidia stock to buy it. So, but one will be to use as a sort of a playground on my own, right? And to work on the different models and the different ideas that I may have. And the other, I may end up certainly trading it in for, for cycles of, because I have the chip, I don't have the server, right? So I've got to plug that chip in somewhere. Having a chip doesn't do you any good unless it's sitting somewhere, being served out. And unless I want to make a $400,000 total investment and, go to, and then, this house probably can't handle like the power and, temp requirements. So I need to put that chip somewhere, and I'm hoping maybe I could use that to trade for, greater access, or maybe even a relationship or partnership with myself. But I don't intend on just holding it and keeping it and, just kind of doing some, just kind of hoarding it, because there's diminishing returns by keeping it in the box. Right. And, but I think it's a time where, it's an opportunity to explore new ideas, maybe work with some people to do that, and find a good partner to, help me make that happen. Not that I'm asking for them. I've got plenty, so please do not come DM me.
You heard it here first. You can DM. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that, because this is such an interesting time, and what's going on with Gen AI for the last year and a half, or almost 2 years at this point. It's really been eye-opening. I mean, from my perspective as a kind of an industry observer in the CRM and CX, to see, if you go back 2 years ago and to see where we are today and how it's impacted just my little industry, it's like completely different. And
Oh
and
yeah.
we're, like I said,
Oh
we're
yeah.
only 2 years, not even 2 years into this. Just give me, if we were to talk about, kind of next year about this stuff, about what Andreessen's doing, how that might impact the overall, VC industry, and also how that might impact the whole startup industry, because potentially this opens up more opportunities to get access to the things that will help them to build the business they're looking for. What impact do you think this will have over the next year or so?
I think one of the things that there's two things that comes to mind. One is that, more VCs are going to take this idea and go do this on their own, right? And of course, the availability, like right now, last year, I think Nvidia alone, they sold 500,000 units. So we'll call them CPUs. And then this year they're expected to produce or forecast to produce 2 million. So there's going to be more availability of these that are going to be out there, and maybe more VCs will do this. But I think the smarter VC who may not have as much as $42 billion, or $7 billion at their disposal, or can spend $500 million on buying, an array of 20,000 of these, they'll probably find ways to, come up with the good partnerships with other firms that do, and they utilize it in a different capacity. Like, again, back to that kind of co-working space. So we're going to see more firms try to help companies by building and developing relationships and partnerships, either with larger cloud providers, maybe with Nvidias or AMDs or any of these other firms, and then say, listen, we're in the business of doing this. We're going to buy a critical, amount of them. Can we get a discount, right, in some way? And they're going to pass those savings on, or maybe it's just going to be part of the business model for them. But I hope by the next year, or maybe the year after, so we're talking about maybe 2026 or 2025, is that we're going to see companies and startups making progress in using these directly to solve specific problems, not just, the infrastructure ones. I think most of the companies that are getting a lot of, visibility with regards to AI are infrastructure startups or infrastructure related startups or something down that chain where it's a highly technical. We are still seeing, the proliferation of how that's going to be real life, how that's going to change real life. And that's where I'm kind of putting my head in. And it's advice to all the founders out there, right? You can have an AI, you can slap an AI. I've heard enough pitches. You can slap AI into anything. Remember the days of machine learning? Everybody slapped AI into everything, but it never solved the problem at hand, or it never did it really well. And that still applies today. You need to be solving now the stakes are even higher. You need to solve a bigger problem or a more complex problem, and then be able to kind of start to say, all right, this is why we need the infrastructure to do it. Just having the infrastructure is not a differentiator. Just having the infrastructure or access to it is not the differentiator. Or having built a model or an AI. I mean, my 9-year-old son now can build like some basic fundamental AIs with some code and drag and drop today with no code. So now it's got to be, how are you solving a particular problem? Is it big enough? And fundamentally, again, back to fundamentals, how fast are you able to execute given this new direction that you have. So that's what we're going to see, is hopefully more specific opportunities and specific problems that'll be solved for businesses or consumers at large.
I think I'm going to be on the lookout for how, there's a lot of vendors that have their VC, arm, like, Salesforce has Salesforce Ventures, and
That's right.
all these. So there's enterprise software companies that have their venture arms, and they also are looking to kind of maintain relationships, like you were saying, with the hot startups, either through investing or potential acquisition. I can see those enterprises also figuring out a way to play in this game too, because
easily.
It just makes a ton of sense. They've got money. I mean, I don't care what all this little layoff stuff. They got money, all right, and so they are looking to figure out the best way to leverage that money. And it might be, investing in some of these things and saying, hey, and building up their own little technology stack for the companies they invest in. So I could actually see enterprise software companies kind of taking the lead from what AZ is doing, and other venture capital companies are probably going to do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, they've been doing this for a long time. Part of the reason for having these venture arms or these M&A arms is to go and explore what other innovative companies are doing. And whether they succeed or not, let's just say they don't succeed, but they were onto something. You have, now you have 20 entities. Let's say you invest in 20 different companies. You have 20 entities that's going to look at different things and explore different avenues that you can't do as an enterprise alone. Your responsibility is to your shareholders, your company, your executive team, your employees, and you're already down a particular path. So, if Salesforce is in CRM today, maybe Salesforce is in something else in in the next 5 years. And because of this reason, I mean, Nvidia's own story is a great lesson for a lot of companies that, they have always built a great platform. They navigated into the graphic GPU space. They even invented the term GPU. And when they decided to go down this path, they built a whole platform around this particular type of infrastructure and this type of problem to be solved. And then they got into AI intentionally, but they saw the door open because of what happened with Bitcoin and the use of GPUs beyond the scope of what regular CPUs can do. And now that we have these more complex, means of interacting with each other and how we want to do business together, it transformed NVIDIA, right? You ask people about NVIDIA today, they don't think of them as a graphics card company. They think of them as an AI company. But, that's not to say maybe somebody in the CRM space could transform into something else. One of the other VCs that I know, I follow her around, and she, her name's Vanessa Larco, and she, really talked about something that resonates, and certainly I talk about with other firms, is that, right now enterprises used to be slow to adopt, and that's where the startups had advantages. Now, like to what you were alluding to, Brent, now if they are picking up on this, their time to market and their ability to be agile and figuring out whether this model or this particular problem set to be solved with this type of infrastructure works has shortened a great deal, which means there's a lot more pressure for startups to move faster and execute quicker, which is what's in Andreessen's head, is like, if I need to have one of my portfolio companies be acquired, they have to move faster than an enterprise. And now enterprises are moving faster, save all the usual stuff that enterprises have to work through in terms of blocking and tackling themselves. So it's an interesting dynamic nonetheless. And since we are future soothsayers that would love to explore different avenues, that's one definitely to look for as well, is the time to innovate will shrink for enterprises that startups will have to sweat a little more than they used to, than they used to before.
All right, this has been fascinating, and this is not going away. I remember somebody talking about, this Gen AI stuff. It's just the fascination with the tulips in the 15th century. It's like, are you kidding me? You're comparing the tulip mania to what's going on here. I mean, damn! All you can do with the tulip is look at the damn thing. This is a little different. I mean, when you got companies buying, like VCs buying 20,000 of them, spending billions of dollars. I think there's a little bit more than tulip mania going on. I'm just kind of putting it out there.
I mean, we know today, right, Brett, that you need the hype in order to democratize the use, right? I don't think people, if AI is not new, and people have been using it. As a matter of fact, like the biggest use case is neural nets and deep learning that we still haven't seen completely. We've experienced it maybe with some autonomous cars and drones here and there, but I mean, it hasn't touched everybody individually like some of these other technologies have. And so there's still a lot of room to grow. But I appreciate being obviously in the go-to-market space, and the market, you have to get people excited about it for them to turn around and invest into it, whether that's their time, their money, their energy, the opportunity cost of learning something else, right, in order for that to happen. And so that's what we're seeing today that I haven't seen in the last 3 iterations of AI that have come up and, died down. So what I think what will happen is AI will be sort of, okay, well, let's stop talking about AI. And what I hope will happen is let's start talking about what you're doing. Like, what are you solving? Like, are you discovering a new, faster way of cancer treatment? Are you coming up with more innovative, energy efficient ways to produce power? Are you coming up with space exploration, solving hunger problems, poverty? I mean, that's the kind of stuff that will be fantastic, that hopefully will come out of this. And I don't care about the hype, but if it creates the opportunity for people to be inspired to do some of those things.
I'll end with this. Because what you just said really brought back something that Nick Zitzen, who's the chief strategy officer over at ServiceNow, said when we had a chance to sit down with him at their knowledge conference. I guess that was May or June, I don't know, somewhere in there. But
Time's
one of the
flying.
things he said, yeah, it's like it's melding into each other. But he said something is like, at next year's Knowledge 24 event, what I really want is for our customers to talk about the ROI that they got from Gen AI, as opposed to us talking about how great it is. And I thought that is so spot on, because what that does is put the impetus on not only them, but their customers to figure it out and to put this to use and to do it in a way that is not driven by hype, but is driven by trying to solve challenges. And if that's what happens from here to the next year, I think it's a win-win for everything.
I think so. That's a great example. Fantastic example. So,
man, this has been great. Once again, the Galahad of GPUs.
Not the I gotta look that up now. Like, what is that?
Oh, that's like, the Knights of the Round Table. There was Lancelot, and his son was Galahad. So
Galahad. Oh, that's right. That's right. Chock full of wisdom.
So you had the Midas of
you and I are doing trivia night the next time, wherever we're going, whenever we get together.
You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna do more of these, because I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg, and things will get even more interesting as time goes on. So I think it'd be great if we try to do this regularly, because there's just so much going on, and it's really interesting.
It would be fascinating. Lots of stories to tell, but also I'd love to learn from folks who are listening in as well. I mean, I'm always constantly having to keep up with what's going on, and I even know the infrastructure behind it. I've seen and applied AI everywhere, but you're always in a constant learning. But I don't want that to be intimidating for folks, because again, if you're inventing, innovating, trying to use AI for something, it's just like anything else. Like, what problem are you solving, and how can AI really enhance that? And there are ways to make that work.
By the way, that's Bob Fagel who's asking,
yeah,
how many nicknames does Anand have? Hey, he keeps on doing things like this, he's gonna get more. All I know is there's about 3 or 4 of them at this point. We'll figure it out. There might be some more along the way.
Anyway. Honored, Bob. Yeah.
All right,
Brent, thank you so much, man. This is fantastic. We'll do more.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for everybody out there. Thanks for the interesting comments too. And remember, tomorrow, a few more good minutes with Ron Miller, TechCrunch Enterprise reporter. Always got something interesting he's talking about. So we'll do that tomorrow. In the meantime, have a great rest of the day. We will